عملت لحلمي عملت كثيرا وها قد حصل سهرت تعبت وقد طاب ذا اليوم حلم السمر عملت لحلمي عملت كثيرا وها قد حصل سهرت تعبت وقد طاب ذا اليوم حلم السمر هلا مرحبا يا كرام الوجوه لكم تزدهي أحرفي والجمل بقاعة زهر وفرحة عمر وسعد أطل هلا مرحبا يا كرام الوجوه لكم تزدهي أحرفي والجمل بقاعة
confidence. I want to break that down a little bit. So there's confidence, and people say, where does that come from? Sister Linda, why are you on national television? Where do you get that confidence from? And what I tell people is it comes from being a person who has truth. There's no reason for me not to be confident when I know that what I am saying and what I believe and the faith that I follow is a faith of truth. So sisters and brothers, we have to understand first who we are, what we believe, where we come from, and what our foundation is. When I think many Muslims believe that last night was Mawlid al-Nabawi, and it's a time for us to think about and learn more and read more about the life of the Prophet ﷺ. When I think about our Prophet ﷺ, I think, who was he? For me, he was a racial justice activist. He was a human rights activist. He was a feminist. He was a selfless man who always stood with and for and on behalf of the oppressed. Now, if we are told to follow in the seerah of the Prophet, then we must all be human rights activists. We must all be racial justice activists. And we must all be confident in who we are and in the faith that we follow. A lot of people say to me, sister, for me, I'm obviously, many of you know this, but I am Palestinian. Very proud of my Palestinian heritage, the blood that runs through my veins, a blood of a very resilient and courageous people. But I also believe the Palestinian people are a people of faith, because faith gives us hope and confidence. And if we didn't believe that we have hope, or we lost hope, we wouldn't be able to continue to do the work and be the people that we are. Oftentimes, we think about all that is wrong in the world around us. We think about all the struggles and the obstacles that we have. And what gives me confidence, but also gives me hope, is that we are not experiencing anything, sisters and brothers, in comparison to the obstacles and challenges that our Prophet ﷺ experienced. So we are a little bit privileged in what we call the oppression of Muslims in America. The oppression of Muslims in America, sisters and brothers, is nothing in comparison to the oppression of Muslims in other parts of the world. We have so much opportunities afforded to us here, sisters and brothers, that we do not have in other parts of the world. We have sisters and brothers and Muslim sisters and brothers who every single day, whether it be in places like Egypt, or in Yemen, or in Pakistan, or in Palestine, in Syria, who stand up in the face of tyranny, in the face of snipers. They can be killed at any moment, sisters and brothers, but they have the courage and the confidence and the faith in Allah to continue to do what they do. So we, sisters and brothers here in the United States of America, we need to do something very important. I actually heard a brother say this in Philadelphia, and I'm going to keep saying this in every place that I go. A brother in Philadelphia, a Muslim brother in Philadelphia, said, we need to get off the complaints counter and start going to the claims counter. Because oftentimes in the Muslim community, we talk a lot about, this is what's happening to our community. These are all the ills in our community and outside of our community. But it's very rare to find people who are actually doing something about those things. And I think, as Sister Malika said, we all have a role to play. People say, Sister Linda, why are you doing immigrant rights work? Why are you part of Black Lives Matter? And I tell people because immigration and immigrant rights is an issue in Islam. Migration is part of Islamic history. We understand what it means to be migrants. We understand the moving from one place to another, the treating of strangers that come into our midst, and us ourselves as Muslim being strangers in other lands. Black Lives Matter. Sisters and brothers, first of all, a third of your community is African American. So if you don't think ending police brutality or discrimination and racism against Black people, if you think that's not your issue, then we really have a problem in the Muslim community, and we have a question of our faith and who we think is part of the Ummah. Sisters and brothers, if there was ever a racial justice activist that we should ever look up to, it is our Prophet. Our Prophet was very clear about an Arab not being superior to a Black person not being superior to an Arab. The idea of equality amongst the races was something that our Prophet profoundly demonstrated to us over and over in the course of his very short life that he lived on this earth. We are in a situation now where I hear a lot of conversations online, and I'm sure people are watching these things, sisters that say, sister, I'm scared. I hear a lot about women being harassed. I'm wearing hijab. I might go to a public school. Maybe, I don't have a lot of Muslims in my school or in my community. And I think Brother Hassan brought up a really good, important point. And I don't want to say that if you are feeling afraid that you should not be able to alter maybe how you wear your hijab, or thinking about maybe going out with other sisters, or making sure that you're not going out at night alone. And I understand the precautions that people have to make. But I want to be very clear with my sisters and my brothers, those who are shaving beards, for example, that we live in a country where we need to understand our history as Muslims. And oftentimes in immigrant Muslim communities, or people who are children of immigrants, our parents haven't taught us what our history of Islam is in America. Your lineage is so deep, sisters and brothers, in this country. Islam didn't start on 9/11, and Islam didn't start when your Palestinian parents came here in the 1970s, and it didn't start when your Pakistani father came to medical school. Islam has been on the shores of this nation since the days of its founding. If they did not want Islam in America, then they shouldn't have brought over 25% of Black slaves who were Muslim to America. This is how deep your lineage is in this country. We belong here, sisters and brothers, and we have to start acting like we belong here. Yes, many of us have families in other parts of the world, and we love them, and we love our homelands and the homelands of our parents and our grandparents. But this, sisters and brothers, right here, the United States of America, Brooklyn, New York, where I was born, this is my country. And when you understand your history, sisters and brothers, when you understand that your roots are so deep in this nation, that will give you confidence to stand up to those who tell you to go back to your country, because this country right here is our country, and we deserve to live here like everybody else. We live in a country that was founded on religious freedom. So when we have people who fight against our community, or to try to strip our right away as Muslims to practice our religion, this is against the founding and the values of this nation, or what we were supposed to live up to as this nation. So when we fight against Islamophobes or against legislation to limit the opportunity for Muslims to practice Islam freely, what we're doing, sisters and brothers, is we're not asking anybody for any favors. We are asking for the very rights that we should already have, and the rights that we deserve, and the rights afforded to us by the Constitution of the United States of America. This, sisters and brothers, is where I get my confidence from. I understand my history. I organize from a place of self-worth. I believe that our community and what will make us a stronger community and a more sustainable community and a community that can stand up to any adversity is something very simple that is afforded to us in Islam: dignity, sisters and brothers. If we organize from a place of dignity, oftentimes, and I'll give you an example, something that bothers me very deeply is when I hear that there are going to be armed men, people with guns, standing in front of our masajid. And I hear sisters and brothers talking about, we are going to bring ice cold water, and we are going to go and maybe bake some cookies for them and try to have a conversation with them about Islam. Sisters and brothers, when our children are walking into our masajid and they see men outside of our masajid with guns, and the way that you are teaching our children that it is okay and acceptable for people to come and intimidate us and harass us and instill fear in us and our children, this is not an example of our Prophet. If you want to teach Islam, go down the street and knock on that church door. Knock on the doors of your neighbors. Talk to other parents in your children's public schools. Oftentimes, sisters and brothers, we focus on trying to convince the enemy about Islam when we are not convincing the people who are more likely to be our allies and our friends. Sisters and brothers, sometimes we operate from a place of weakness. We stand on national television and we say things like, Islam is a religion of peace. Sisters and brothers, what's more important about Islam is that Islam is a religion of justice. And justice is not just us. So if the Muslim community is only going to stand up when there are oppression and injustice against Muslims only, then you are not practicing the Islam that our Prophet ﷺ practiced. Our Prophet stood up for those who were oppressed regardless of what their faith was. And if you are only outraged when 3 students in Chapel Hill are murdered, but you are not outraged when a young black man who is unarmed is shot down on the streets, then that is a question of our iman, sisters and brothers. We are all God's creations and we must care about other communities, because when the time comes that the Muslim community is going to need allies, they're going to ask you, where were you when we needed you? Sisters and brothers, we have a beautiful faith. And if we are going to teach people about Islam, the best way to teach people about Islam is to be there, to show up when there are injustices happening amongst other communities. And I just want to give you one example, sisters and brothers. This past year in April, on April 13th, I went on a march. I started in Staten Island, New York, where Eric Garner, a father, was choked by a New York Police Department, by a police officer. Even after he called 11 times on video, he said, I can't breathe, I can't breathe, I can't breathe 11 times. And still the police officer choked him until he died on a street in Staten Island. I marched with 75 people from Staten Island, New York, all the way to Washington, D.C. for 9 days, sisters and brothers. The majority of the people that I marched with, sisters and brothers, were not Muslim. So every night we had to find somewhere to sleep, right? So in Philadelphia, which was one of our stops, we went to Al-Hidayah Center, which, by the way, is a mass center. It is owned by the Muslim American Society. It's called Al-Hidayah in Philadelphia. We walked into the masjid. They welcomed us into the masjid. The imam, who is a Palestinian imam, who actually doesn't speak English very well, he welcomed 75 people, most of whom were not Muslim, into the masjid. They had people there who fed them. We talked about the concept of justice in Islam and racial justice. They gave us a place to sleep. We woke up in the morning. They cooked breakfast for us. They gave us water bottles and snacks to take with us on the road. And when we were leaving there, the young people that I was with, most of whom were Black American who were not Muslim, said to me, I have never in my life felt so peaceful in a place. At 5 o'clock in the morning, the imam called the adhan and everybody got up. His beautiful, soft voice. One kid told me, who lives in Brooklyn, said to me, never, sister, did I feel safe like this. Never did I feel solace. I felt so tranquil. And they stood up listening to the adhan and listening to the salah in the morning. Let me tell you what's going to happen with those sisters and brothers. Those non-Muslims who were welcomed into the masjid, when the masjid understood that they were marching from New York City to Washington, D.C. to raise awareness about police brutality and discrimination and racism against black people, they, sisters and brothers, will be the first people to defend our community because they saw the best that our community has to offer. When they welcomed them into the house of God, they allowed them to sleep there, they fed them, they nurtured them, and they told them, this is what our faith calls us to do. The Imam said, we are not doing you a favor. This is what our Prophet would have done if you had come at the time if our Prophet was alive. Imagine that, sisters and brothers. Confidence comes from our faith. If you believe that Islam is the truth, if you believe that standing up and defending your Prophet and your faith with truth, that is the weapon that we have, sisters and brothers. And that is what gives me confidence, and that is what is going to give all of us Muslims confidence, is that remembering where we come from, remembering our faith, and remembering the life of our Prophet. Assalamu alaikum.
هلا مرحبا يا كرام الوجوه لكم تزدهي أحرفي والجمل بقاعة زهر وفرحة عمر.
In the public sector, you are, in your opinion, how the best way to be involved in your community? What would be the best way to do it, and who would want to answer it?
Bismillah. Very quick, I think it's very important that people can recognize that we are followers of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and that we do invest in giving back in society in whatever ways we can. You know, mashallah, we heard about feeding the homeless, standing up for other communities. There's countless ways. Do whatever you can and excel in whatever you do. Excel in your field, your education, your work, but don't do it in a way where people cannot translate that into you being a member of the Muslim community, because they see people doing bad things in the name of Islam all the time on TV, and when people like us try to do good things, we try to hide our identity, and really then it creates a disconnect. So I really believe it's important we visibly display our Muslim identity in whatever physical way that's possible, so that people do connect us. People sometimes say, oh brother, you know, there's difference of opinion whether the Kufi is Sunnah or not. I say, look, don't even worry about that. If our sisters are out there in hijab, why are we as brothers hiding our identity? We need to stand in solidarity with them. When you have non-Muslim women who are standing in solidarity with our Muslim sisters wearing hijab, where are the brothers to stand in solidarity with our Muslim sisters wearing hijab? We got to get our act together, brothers.
I think this is a point that you're going to hear often in this conference about, you know, justice is not just us, and when bad things happen, they don't only happen to us. And I'll give you one example. Just this past year, 8 black churches were burned, right? This is a place where we believe that Christians and Jews and Muslims, we pray to the same God. So here is a place, a church, a black church where God's name is invoked, where people love God. And you know, we don't agree on all the tenets of Christianity, but we do believe that they pray to the same God. What did the Muslims do? We raised $108,000 that were distributed to black churches. We called the campaign, Muslim-run campaign, Respond with Love, because that is what Islam is. We didn't just sit back and say, those are not our mosques, alhamdulillah. We said we know how much we love our mosques. We know how much and how central and important they are to us, and we understand the importance of church to black Christians. So as a Muslim community on a national level, we raised $106,000. It wasn't just us saying that was so sad or going in the media and saying that's a really terrible thing. We showed action. And amongst our sisters and brothers in the black American community, the response that we received as Muslims of saying this is what it means to be a Muslim, that was what we represented. So that's a big national campaign, but think about things in your local community. Every single community, I don't care where you live, maybe it's 20, 25 minutes away, you have a food pantry. Take your kids, you don't even have to go through the masjid, take your own kids, your cousins, your nieces. One Sunday, one Saturday, feed some homeless people. When people see you, You don't have to tell them, here are the 5 pillars of Islam. They will already experience the generosity, the charity, the love, and the compassion of our faith through your action. Because sisters and brothers, Islam is not just a religion. It's not just what you believe in your heart. It's about action. So if your worship doesn't include public action, then it's incomplete. And we have to think about how to complete and be what I call public Muslims. That's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for public Muslims.
No, I definitely agree. We need to be out more visible in our communities. I go to many different meetings in Boston. I go to a human trafficking roundtable, a drugs and prostitution task force. And for many years, I would go, and the other attendees at those meetings who are not Muslim, I'm the only Muslim at those meetings, they would be, oh, the Muslim community is concerned about these issues? And I would say, yes, they are. Now, years later, they're like, okay, well, you're here, but what about the rest of the Muslim community? Where are they? So we need to be more involved in our communities. These are all issues that affect us in one way or another. And I think this is the best way to show society the true face of Islam.
Assalamu alaikum. I have a question for the whole panel, if that's okay. Sure. How do you build the confidence in the Muslim community to get involved in the political process? And can you explain the importance of that?
That's an excellent question. I think we have to recognize, especially the immigrant population, that we're not in those countries anymore where it's taboo to get involved in politics. In many of the countries we came from, I mean, I came from Syria, you get involved in politics, you get killed. In America, if we don't get involved in politics, we will get killed. That's the reality. It's the opposite. We can't afford not to be involved, all right? The biggest resistance I get running one of the strongest civil rights organizations in Florida isn't from non-Muslims, it's from Muslims. Oh, brother, you shouldn't be suing the FBI. I'm like, brother, with all due respect, when I visit Washington, D.C., the director of Homeland Security invites me to his house because he respects me because I'm suing the FBI. All right, Linda and I mean, we get invited to the White House, high-level meetings, not because we're just trying to please them, but because we're speaking truth to power, and they recognize that, and they respect that. That's what America is built on. So we can't afford not to be involved. We have to recognize that our survival in this country is dependent upon political involvement, media involvement, and legal involvement. You have to be involved in politics to make sure the laws are not used to oppress us. You have to be involved in the courts to make sure that those laws are upheld, and you have to be involved in the media to make sure the perception, public perception, does not change, to enable the establishment of laws that will be used to oppress us and others. So we can't afford not to be involved. Secondly, we have to recognize the blessings of being Muslims in America, that we have more freedom to practice our faith in America than almost anywhere else in the world, and we have more opportunity to work for constructive change than almost anywhere else in the world, and that if we change ourselves, wallahi, as Muslims in America, we have the power to change the world for the better. Islamophobes recognize that. That's why they don't want us involved. Don't give in to the Islamophobes by not being involved, because that's what they want.
So, yeah. So, I was trying to be diplomatic, but it's not gonna work out for me. Sisters and brothers, we have no choice in the matter. There is no choice whether you want to be involved or not be involved. And I said this earlier. In places like Syria, in Yemen, in Egypt, across the Arab world, we saw Muslims here saying, MashaAllah, the Arab Spring fighting for democracy, right? People willing to be shot down in the streets for the right to vote. They want free elections. They want freedom, sisters and brothers. And here we are in the United States of America, where you have the freedom to practice your religion. You have access to the ballot so you can vote in free elections. And we sit back, sisters and brothers, and we complain about everything that's bad, and we don't go to the polls on election day. And people say, in this country, your vote doesn't matter. Sisters and brothers, if your vote did not matter, Republicans would not be passing voter ID laws where they require you to have an identification card. And then after they pass those laws, what do? They close the DMV offices in poor communities of color in places like Alabama. You know why, sisters and brothers? Because your vote counts. We have no choice but to vote. The reason why we are the most targeted community right now in the election, we're not the only community. We're not the first community in this country to be attacked. We are attacked because we are politically weak. it is easy to attack the weak one. The bullies in the schools don't attack the strong kids, they attack the weak ones. And us sisters and brothers in the political landscape of the United States of America, the Muslims are the weak ones. So in this upcoming election, you have no choice but to participate. And if you do not participate, I will put personal responsibility and our communities on every individual Muslim who has the right to vote, or if you are a US citizen, when our daughters get attacked, when our masajid get vandalized, when they are trying to pass anti-Sharia bills, if that happens, it is nobody's fault but the Muslims. So I am counting on you sisters and brothers that as in this election you vote against hate. That you vote for people who stand up for our values and our principles as a community. It takes you 5 minutes, and when you are in that ballot, when you are in the polling site, I want you to remember a sister or a brother across the world who died for the very right that you have here in the United States of America. Don't forget that.
I think the main message for building confidence is appreciate the blessings that Allah has given us and why He chose us to be Muslims in America, where Allah is with us and the law is with us, where we have more freedom and opportunity to practice our faith and work for positive change than anywhere else. This is a blessing and Allah will ask us about this blessing, so use it before you lose it. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless us to be shining examples of the deen of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and take people out of the darkness into the light. Barakallahu feekum. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
عملت لحلمي عملت كثيرا وها قد حصل سهرت تعبت وقد طاب ذا اليوم حلو السمر عملت لحلمي عملت كثيرا وها قد حصل سهرت تعبت وقد طاب ذا اليوم حلو السمر هلا مرحبا يا كرام الوجوه لكم تزدهي أحرفي والجمل بقاعة زهر وفرحة عمر وسعد أطل هلا مرحبا يا كرام الوجوه لكم تزدهي أحرفي والجمل بقاعة زهر وفرحة عمر وسعد